I'm convinced that we are in a pivotal moment, that totalitarianism now is veiled, and it's more dangerous than it's ever been. I've been speaking about it a lot, that the bureaucracy indicated by, say, Kafka or Huxley, and most obviously Orwell, is being augured and introduced. That the continual threat that we are presented with, by we, I mean people who consume media, is that we have to be wise and aware of the militaristic dictator, strongman archetype emerging and seizing a stranglehold over an enthralled population beleaguered by charisma. But I've felt for a while that there's this banalization, this bureaucratization of culture, this desacralization. But like a person with a cultural background that I come from, a person that's like, you know, loved Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Malcolm X, and even people that I'm struggled to put in the inventory, knowing some of the people that will be watching this, Che Guevara, I know. Like all the people that get iconoclastically attacked for their obvious and many failings, but nevertheless somehow represent rebellion and standing up to the establishment. It's been very hard for me to sort of learn over time that this is a very important and significant election. When you were running as an independent, it was clear you were making a great impact for the many, many people that feel that the nationalistic aspects of the MAGA campaign were off-putting, even though I personally can understand why nationalism would be a response to globalism. It's pretty obvious why that would be the case. You joining Trump's campaign, supporting Trump, overcoming the many evident and I suppose obvious differences, has meant that I now know what my junior and peripheral role is to advocate for an anti-establishment movement that has a chance to disrupt something that I feel that if it were to remain uninterrupted, could bring about an unprecedented level of control. What kind of personal challenges have you faced in making this movement? And what now is your message to the many, many people across America, if polls are to be believed, that supported your independent candidacy?
Yeah, let me begin by just commenting on, something that has puzzled me, because my whole generation grew up reading Aldous Huxley and George Orwell and Arthur Koestler and Solzhenitsyn and Robert Heinlein and all these other I would call them almost philosophers or political philosophers who were warning us about the advent of this kind of system, that this would happen one day. And we all, looked at that and said, yeah, maybe in 200 years or something like that. But that generation that grew up with me, the baby boom generation, who are very well educated, this is before we discontinued civics lessons in American classrooms. We all grew up reading that. We know better. And the extraordinary phenomena to me is how the capacity for critical thinking has been so overwhelmed and subverted in that entire generation that they're not seeing any of this stuff happen. And they went around along with COVID, which was just this, looked like in many ways a PSYOPs program with orchestrated fear using to disable the capacity for critical thought. And then now those same mechanisms are being used to get them to support Kamala Harris, a person who was not elected, to get them to ignore the fact that the Democratic Party abandoned elections. There was a palace coup against Joe Biden. First of all, Joe Biden's crew disabled the elections to make sure that people like myself could not run against him, so there was no Democratic primaries. And then the kind of faux election that took place, of course, he won all the primaries because they had fixed them in very, very obvious and undeniable ways. But then he then had a palace coup against him, and Kamala was put in there without any pretense that she was ever elected. And yet the Democrats are able to tell themselves that they are destroying or abandoning democracy in order to save it from the much greater threat, which is Donald Trump. And people who support Kamala Harris rarely do it because they support any of her policies, which are still unknown. She's never been forced to articulate them. They're supporting her because of the terror of Donald Trump. And this is, that he is going to become a dictator. It will be the end of democracy. That the republic will be destroyed if he gets in there. You see this again and again and again, and it's created this atmosphere of kind of violence against him, but also this extraordinary phenomena where Democrats have walked away from their core values, which were when I grew up. And the Democratic Party was the party of civil rights, of constitutional rights, freedom of speech. The word liberal is derived from a term meaning freedom of speech. My uncle, my father loved the fact that our country was not scared of debate, that the policies that we embraced were policies that had been annealed in the furnace of debate and then triumphed in the marketplace of ideas. We were the party, the anti-war party, and my father ran against the Vietnam War. My uncle said that, John F. Kennedy said that the principal job of a president of the United States is to keep the country out of war. His term in office was one of the first time in modern history that we never sent anybody, a combat veteran, a combat troop abroad to fight. He resisted his military-industrial complex and intelligence apparatus, their pleadings that he go into Laos in 1961, that he go into Cuba in 1961, that he go into Berlin in 1962, Checkpoint Charlie crisis, that he go into Berlin in 63, or that he send combat troops to Vietnam, which he refused to do. And this was the history of the Democratic Party. We were the anti-war party. And now we are the party of war. It is the Democratic Party that created the Ukraine conflict, which is a war that should have never happened.
We can't continue to bring you this beautiful content without the support of our partners.
Do you know what I believe in? Critical thinking. Furthermore, and additionally, I believe in 1775 Coffee's protein creamer. Why? This isn't sugar-filled processed corporate rubbish. With 10 grams of whey protein per serving, you're giving your morning cup the power of revolution, the power to question authority, the power to oppose it, and the caffeine to make you continue when you realize actually quite difficult, challenging power. We're talking about protein, muscle building, metabolism boosting greatness in every single sip for all of us that dare to think, speak, and act freely. 1775 Coffee just revamped their lineup, featuring their classic bold dark roasts and smooth medium blends to the newly launching coffee pods. I can't wait to get my hands on those. And a brain boosting mushroom mix that will take your consciousness to the very next level. No weak brews here, just coffee with purpose. Head over to 1775coffee.com/brand for 15% off. Grab your protein creamer and dive into the new lineup. Elevated consciousness, protein, caffeine, all with a revolutionary bent. That's what it's all about. Don't let your morning brew be part of the matrix. Fuel your day with coffee that stands for something. Revolution and protein.
Where now you have this weird situation where Dick Cheney, who was the greatest villain of the Democratic Party, he was the guy who gave us the Patriot Act. He gave us the torture regime. He gave us extraordinary renditions. He gave us the censorship and surveillance state that came out of the Patriot Act, and he gave us the Iraq War, which is which was a war that was built on deception and pretense. Everybody knows that now. We said we'd never do that again. And it was the worst foreign policy cataclysm in American history. And now Dick Cheney and John Bolton, the people who gave us that, have endorsed Kamala Harris. And 225 other neocons have the people who were driven out of Washington because they were so discredited after Iraq, have now endorsed Vice President Harris. And they're not endorsing her because they've changed. They still think all those were good ideas. They're endorsing her because the Democratic Party has fundamentally changed. That party has become the party which, when I was growing up, it was the party of cops, firefighters, labor unions. It was the party that stood up for little people, working people. And the Republican Party was the party of the rich. And today, it's the opposite. It's absolutely an inversion. The Democratic Party has become the party of big tech, big ag, big pharma, big bankers, big Wall Street, the military-industrial complex. And in fact, the inversion is so stark that in 2020, roughly half the people in this country voted for Republican and half Democrat. But the half voted Republican own only 70% of the wealth in this, or 30% of the wealth, with the half that voted Democrat owns 70% of the wealth. So you've had this complete inversion of the Democratic Party, and a lot of it, and the alliance now between the Democratic Party and the intelligence agencies is something that I could have never believed would happen. I think you had 50 CIA agents endorsing Vice President Biden 2 weeks ago when she gave her very belligerent, Imperium speech at the Democratic Convention, calling for U.S. hegemony around the globe, which is completely undemocratic impulses. She was preceded immediately in her speech by a former CIA director, Leon Panetta, who spoke before, and that is something that could have never happened in the Democratic Convention. You had military generals speaking at that convention. Oh, it's become the party of the neocons, and a lot of that, I think, and if you ask individual Democrats who are my friends, people I grew up with, family members, do you think the Democratic Party is doing these things? They will not answer the question. They'll just say, yes, but Trump. Yes, but, we got to stop Trump at any cost, And it's very it's disarming. It's very troubling to see people who are rational people who you've known your whole life who are now embracing these ideas that we would have called fascistic. The term fascism means a merger of state and corporate power. And that seems to be the general theme of the Democratic Party. And I'll just say one other thing. This is, I love what you said about nationalism being a rational response to globalism. And I think that's absolutely, and you're seeing this, populism now around the world. And I think populism is a good thing. It can be a bad thing too. And, my father was a populist, and populism has two potentials. One is a very idealistic potential, like my father demonstrated, and the other is, populist movement can be hijacked by demagogues and be used to serve very, very dark purposes. But it's a natural response to the globalism that's happening because people want local control and local democracy, and they feel that their sovereignty is being taken away from them. And we're seeing now, in Europe has changed dramatically. There is no freedom of speech in Europe anymore. We saw the head of Telegram, Pavlo Durov, torn out of his airplane when he stopped to refuel in France, and Thierry Breton, who's the chairman of the European Commission, threatening Elon Musk that if he interviewed Donald Trump live on X Spaces, that he would be prosecuted criminally and civilly. We saw 3 weeks ago Brazil censor Twitter and censor a lot of other social media sites. So you're seeing this rise of censorship, of totalitarianism all around the world. And I think the only hope to prevent that in this country is Donald Trump. If Kamala gets in there, this is what's going to happen.
Our new The Oracle series, our first ever group interviews designed to bring the greatest and most authoritative voices in particular subjects together for the very first time. Robert Malone, Dr. Pierre Corey and Steve Kirsch.
What we've experienced is a globally deployed psychological bioterrorism playbook. It's well developed.
And then I started to see just global propaganda directed at essentially distorting, dismissing, and suppressing the evidence of efficacy. And I saw it as a crime.
And at that point, I knew that this was not just a coincidence. There were too many black swans over too short a period. I've never heard anything like this story in my life.
They seem to get the human psyche so well when it comes to brainwashing us and propagandizing us to the direction that they want us to go in, that you would think that they would know that pulling all of these various tactics would actually just push support towards Trump, not away from him.
Ryan Ruth, some of his posts even show that he appeared to have been working with, in his own words, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. He's doing effectively military intelligence, human trafficking of terrorists.
It's in this context that I think Ruth was kind of radicalized. He decided that while he wanted to assassinate Putin, the easier thing would be to assassinate Donald Trump.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.